And now I want to explain something that really simplifies it again, but it helps us get the idea. So we got our transistors here. And for this amp right here, we're going to assume that it's got 4 transistors. To produce 1,000 watts, you'd have more than 4, but for our example here, we're going to assume 4. Okay. Got their 3 little legs on them. If you look at my other videos, you'll see actual MOSFETs and what they look like. Okay, so we're going to say that each one of these transistors, MOSFETs, is putting out 21 amps. 21. And if we were, the legs on them is like, this is your gate, this is your drain, and this is your source, like over there. So these are those little MOSFETs that you see in some of my other videos. And where it adds up to equal our total current that our amplifier is using. So 21 plus 21 equals 84 amps of current. And you've got 1 extra amp for headroom or whatever, just extra current. But basically, this amp is producing these 81 amps of current. So as you put signal into the gate here, what it does is the drain will pull current from the source, and it'll increase as it goes through there. Okay, so what happens when we give an amplifier low voltage? Well, one thing we got to look at in these transistors is 21 is the maximum current that this transistor can generate. And if you actually looked at the spec sheet for this transistor, this is all theoretical because we don't know which transistor this is. But for this one, you would see something like, if you looked at the spec, it would be like from 15 to 21 amps that this transistor can produce. It'll produce 21 amps at 25 degrees Celsius and 15 amps at 100 degrees Celsius. So as they get hot, they're able to produce less current because they're less efficient when they get warm. That's why you don't want your amplifier to get hot, because it produces less power and it's bad on the transistor also. Alright, so what happens when we have low voltage? Let's go back to our equation. Let's say you're pounding it and your alternator doesn't have enough current to maintain 12 volts. And your battery is too weak also to maintain it. So your voltage drifts down to 10 volts. Okay, when you do that, your amplifier is still going to try and produce this 1,000 watts. In order to do that, let's solve for what our current is going to have to be. Because if we're down at 10 volts, our current is no longer 83. It's what? It's now 100. Why? Because 1,000 divided by 10 is 100. So what does that look like to the transistors? Well, now all of a sudden, instead of asking this transistor for 21 amps, you're all of a sudden asking it for 25 amps of current. And it's only able to produce 21 amps of current. So what happens is it tries to produce that 25, and in doing so, it gets red hot trying to reduce that. And when you put low voltage on it, the amp is going to get red hot because these transistors are going to be working overtime. And when they get hot, you remember we said 15 to 21? Well, as they heat up, they become less and less efficient. So the amperage that it's going to be able to put out goes down. So what that sounds like when you're listening to it is, when you're blasting your stereo, the volume goes down and it starts to distort. It sounds really horrible. And that's because you're giving it too low a voltage. It can't produce it, and your transistors are working overtime and they're not even able to produce the current that's necessary. So if you continue to do this, like for an entire song, I mean, you're pounding it and this transistor is trying to produce 25 amps